Absolutely. Thank you. So a little bit more towards your book. Obviously, you had this idea of you wanted to learn more about engagement, and you went out and got the grants and everything as you're leaving off a couple minutes ago. Um,
hmm
what was your goal?
Um, the goal was really to try to, um, there hadn't been a book yet to sort of synthesize what engagement means to journalism, and to try to provide a little bit of not a little bit, but to provide a framework for thinking about engaged journalism, and what exactly that means, and maybe provide an opportunity for individual journalists and um, and students, and even news organizations as a whole to kind of a 5 point framework, do a little bit of a self audit and self assessment, and say how well am I or my organization doing in these 5 areas. Um, so I knew that the tools would change. I knew that the people that I interviewed would change jobs by the time that the book came out. I'd probably say over half of the 100 plus journalists that I interviewed that are listed at the front of the book, I would probably say over half of them have moved on to new opportunities, either within their companies, the same companies, or taken other opportunities elsewhere. And I think that's a real testament to their marketable skills, that they're on the leading edge of this stuff, and so they're getting promoted, and new opportunities are being presented to them. So, but the point is, I knew that there was going to be a lot of things as fast as this industry is changing. I knew that there would be a lot of updates, and changes once the book actually came out in ink and paper form. But I still wanted to provide an overarching framework to kind of think about practicing engagement from a journalistic perspective in the 21st century. And so ultimately, I arrived at those five chapters. You know. Interacting with audiences face to face through events, interacting them, with audiences with digital tools at every step, serving the needs of niche audiences, um, providing interactive news experiences, and then measuring and tracking it all, to see what its impact is on the bottom line. So I think that I'm pretty confident that those five um, general areas and themes are going to endure for at least the next few years before we see another disruption of some sort.
So was there a difference? Did you find between what maybe the publisher or the management view of engagement and the reporter?
Um, hmm. Um, I think at the organizations that are doing it well, there's a common understanding between management and reporters on what effective engagement is. And so I think that's really on the leaders and managers to um, articulate why it's important, for their news organizations to survive, and to articulate the mission. Are they always in perfect sync? No, definitely not. And I especially encountered reporters who, um, some of whom were um, skeptical of, especially the face-to-face component of, like, hosting events and being kind of chummy with their sources in front of an audience, and at the same time, feeling like they're kind of, supposed to be the watchdog of those sources and everything. Uh, a lot of journalists aren't the most, especially I guess newspaper reporters aren't the most extroverted people in the world. And, um, some of them considered some of these new events and these new public facing roles that they are being asked to take as kind of not what they signed up for when they went to become a journalist. But I think, in those cases, I think it's on the publishers and the editors to explain and articulate to their newsrooms why these events are so important to the success of their news organizations. It's from a branding perspective, from an economic perspective, if the events are sponsored and helping earn revenue that can pay for more journalism, and maybe save jobs. I think it's really important for the leaders of and executives of news organizations to explain why it's important. And I also think it's really important for journalists to understand that part of their job these days is to effectively be an ambassador for their organization and try and be invested in the mission, and that the product of journalism that they produce is part of that mission, but there's new responsibilities, and it's all in the name of the greater good of the financial survival of their news organization that's giving them a paycheck. So yeah, there's a disconnect in some places, and so in those cases, I think both the executives and the rank and file. It's on the executives to convey the mission and why it's important, and it's on the rank and file to understand the mission and understand why it's important, and how it's not just an afterthought, but it's part of their role as an employee of the news organization these days.
It's interesting that you put it that way. I often work with organizations in talking to their frontline employees about how they are the ambassadors and how they are really the outward face of the organization. And this is an oversimplification, but if you think about going to a grocery store and you go through all the grocery store being the newspaper, and you go through all the aisles and you check out everything, you have everything, you go to the checkout counter, and it all comes down to whether or not you get through the line fast enough, whether or not you have a good experience. And that's the social engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a good engagement, then the whole experience was not so hot. And in this case, the reporters provide that social engagement, so they're kind of like they're the customer service representative for the organization in some cases.
Yeah, that's a good summation of the whole thing. Is that reporters have always sort of cringed at the idea that they're in the customer service business, and I think that's the sort of arrogance that journalists have to get over, and realize that in many ways it's not the same kind of direct customer service all the time, but really, that's the audience is your lifeblood, and so I guess just like a retail business can't take its paying customers for granted, news organizations can't anymore either.